Welcome to today's edition of 3 Minute Halacha. Chol HaMoed is a hybrid of Chol, of the ordinary weekday, and Moed, the holiday, where some activities, melachot, which are prohibited on Shabbat and Yom Tov, can be permitted and some are prohibited. The question of what is permitted and what is prohibited is always a question of the circumstance, whether it adds to the nature of the day, the joy of the day, or if it's absolutely necessary. One such melacha to consider is the melacha of writing, kotev. It is prohibited on Shabbat and Yom Tov, but can be permitted on Chol HaMoed under certain circumstances. The first possibility is if it is a davar ha'aved, that if you didn't write, would it cause a loss? A classic example given in the Shulchan Aruch for this in Siman Tav Kuf Mem Hey Sif Tet is if a person heard divrei Torah and was afraid that they would forget those divrei Torah, they're permitted to write them down on Chol HaMoed. But the same can be done for other things that you need to do, and if you didn't do them, you would suffer a loss. Another possibility is a tzorech HaMoed, if it's something that needs to take place on Chol HaMoed. Rabbeinu Asher in Moed Katan explains that whenever there is a need, as long as it is a maseh hedyot, something that an ordinary person can do, it is permitted. Case in point, you'd be allowed to write, which is not something that is a craftsman job, a masa uman, but anyone can know how to write, and you'd be allowed to write on Chol HaMoed if there is some need for it on the Moed. Classic example of this is brought in the Shulchan Aruch, where we talk about a Sefer Torah that needs to be repaired. Repairing a Sefer Torah is something that requires an expert. It's a Maseh Uman, and therefore would not be permitted on Chol HaMoed unless if it was needed for public use, if there was the only Sefer Torah available. In that case, there's a public need, and even Maseh Uman is permitted. The Rambam goes one step further in Hilchot Yom Tov in chapter 7, Halacha 14, where he says a person's allowed to write personal letters on Chol HaMoed because generally they're written informally and anyone would be able to write these kinds of letters. Ma'aseh Hedyot. The Rambam says that while there are those who dispute the Rambam's position, one could be lenient as long as they do some kind of shinui. Some people may use a different kind of pen, may write it a little bit differently, as the Magen Avraham suggested, to write a little bit on an angle. Computers may even provide an additional reason for things to be permitted because a computer screen is an oscillating image and not permanent. And therefore, if you type a Maseh Hedyot and you see it on the screen, it should be permitted if there's a need for it on the Yom Tov to be doing this activity. Interestingly, there is a machloket about printing when it's not necessary. Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach permits computer printing, whereas Reb Moshe Sternbach prohibits it because the end result looks very, very professional. When it comes to Chol HaMoed, the main point is to remember we have to preserve the Moed, despite the fact that there's still an element of Chol associated with these days.